from the first season out of third, what has been the most exciting thing for you to see the show develop from the pilot to the end of the third season? Because you can talk about that.
Yeah, I would say it all started with this cast, and seeing this cast push themselves to sillier and yet also more devastating emotional places. Like, I think of the ending of the season 3 with Chidi and Eleanor, and then I think of how they met, just him walking through the front door in that pilot, and it's such a journey. And to see how all of that has just, I get emotional even talking about it. Yeah.
What has been the most fun for you going from the pilot to now in your character's evolution?
Well, I'd never acted before the pilot, so it was knowing that wouldn't be the first and last time I ever act. I can't believe I made it through 4 seasons opposite Ted Danson, and to watch the way that we've all changed and watch the way that we've all grown and learned, and like we now know about philosophy in a way that we didn't know before, and we've touched so many people, not literally, we haven't done anything illegal, we have emotionally moved so many people all around the world. Like, there's nowhere I go where people don't recognize our show, which is extraordinary.
So how, for season 4, have you asked the producers how far you can push your evilness?
Well, by way of evil, Sean is maximum Derek. Sean's at 11 most of the time, I feel. But it, I don't want to blow your minds. Things happen in season 4. It's exciting. Daring moves are made, and yeah, Sean's a demon. Sean's a bad dude. Don't be Sean.
What was your reaction when you read the montage scene for season 3, your goodbye?
I was excited to read it because it felt very earned. It felt like a wonderful moment to infuse into a comedy show. Like, no, we're actually going to stop down just for about 90 seconds and show this love language. It was also fun to shoot because we got to shoot all these like montage sequences we'd never shot. Remember, we were out in the boat, we got stuck, and all those fun things. But it was, I'll tell you something, it was sad to shoot.
Yeah.
When we were sitting there having to watch our love story unfold and then break apart.
Yeah. Yeah, it was, I mean, it was a real thump to the Adam's apple, you know? It's like, you're just sort of like, oh no. But yeah, I feel like it's, you know, it's a really, life can be that way. You know, you finally kind of get to a place where you know, are settled, and then the rug is completely ripped out from under you, and I feel like that is just like a perfect, like, sort of like metaphor for how things can be, and to sort of like really appreciate those moments when you have them. And so yeah, it was tough, but I feel like it was just such an appropriate thing to do.
What was the, how has it been for you, because your character's always been linked together, the arc from the pilot to the end of season 3, which I know you're allowed to talk about. How has it been for you, your developing of your relationship?
Well, it's a blast. I mean, I lucked out because my first TV show, I get to be, my character gets to be best friends with Ted Danson, right? So that, I mean, with Michael, which means Darcy gets to hang out with Ted Danson all the time, which is a dream come true, and has fulfilled me and fulfilled my life and fulfilled my career. I'm so lucky, and not a second has been lost on me. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, seriously.
No, seriously. So I lucked out in that department because I just get to hang out and become friends and watch and learn from this dude.
I love that after about 2 or 3 weeks, I confessed this a year after the fact,
right.
But about 2 or 3 weeks into the first season, I thought, oh, poor Darcy, she's just going to play this one-dimensional computer. Oh, she's going to get so bored. And look, I get to be a demon, you know. And here she is with an arsenal of about 40 characters she plays every day. Pretty cool.
Pretty cool.
So we're going to go to something little Captain Marvel. All right. So, Captain, what was your initial reaction when you first read the script?
Awesome. When I first got the call for the job, actually, it was just unbelievable. Like, the chance to bring Marvel's first female superhero to life, and to have the opportunity to do that, especially from an art standpoint, and build that world. And then when I read the script and found out it was set in the 90s, it was heaven.
Okay, so now you love the script, you think it's awesome, and now you have to work. You have to actually make it happen. What was the most challenging trying to work on that film?
Oh, shoot. There were definitely a lot of challenges. I think Blockbuster and doing that entire strip mall, because we had to do all of the storefronts going all the way down and build around the corner, and then she had the chase scene. So having to build all those out and make sure they were period correct and that it felt real to the audience, I think was definitely a challenge. In addition to that, I got to do the drop ship crash at the end of the movie with Jude Law. And so that, we were basically in the middle of nowhere, 3.5 hours outside of LA, and figuring out the resources and making that happen. I mean, we had a great crew, a fantastic construction crew and greens crew that brought that to life and made it feel real, I think.
And when you have a big budget movie like this, it must be a very interesting relationship between you, the visual arts, effects artists, like all the different. How was it working with the visual effects, trying to see that world, and you have to blend the two worlds, live action and the CGI?
I think the biggest challenge in that is just knowing what they need to deliver their digital half. So it's kind of that teamwork of, we're going to give you our half, you're going to finish it off in your half, and just making sure that it's a cohesive design. I think, the biggest challenge is just making sure those things can marry and having clear lines of communication between departments.
Okay, so I see something about Birds of Prey. I will not ask for any plot spoilers, but her character, Harley Quinn, is kind of chaotic. So does that mean the set, production design, and everything else has to be equally chaotic?
I will say that the production designer, KK Barrett, definitely came in and did, if you know any of his work, he's done some amazing things over the years, including her. He definitely brought his spin to it, and I think it's definitely a new and exciting Gotham, and I think it'll be really cool for the audience to see that, because I think what he brought to it is he gave Gotham Harley's lens. So it's definitely seen more, you're seeing more of her world, which usually we're seeing more Bruce Wayne's world. So I think that'll be a fun new experience for the audience.
Well, all right, so what was your initial reaction when you first got brought onto the project of Westworld?
You know, I was told very little about Westworld. I got a phone call and they said it was a sci-fi meets cowboy western, kind of like The Truman Show, but we can't tell any more about it. And, half the time when I get calls for jobs, they give us very little information. They can't disclose a lot over the phone until we sign that NDA and get in there. So I signed up because I knew the art director. I thought, okay, let's see what this one's like. And I drove onto, the first season was shot on a spot called Melody Ranch in Los Angeles. And you're driving down the highway, you get to Melody Ranch, you pull off the highway, dirt road, old western. That back lot has actually been there for decades. They've shot so many really great movies there. So my first impression was, oh man, where am I now? This isn't Los Angeles anymore. I'm on set of a western, and our art department was in a double wide trailer behind one of the old western facades. So you got up onto the little porch and opened the door like, howdy everybody, and that was every day going to work. So it was pretty awesome.
Yeah, it's interesting because you have a blended genre. You have an Old West, but a futuristic and a TV show. What was kind of some of the challenges of trying to create some of that look?
Well, our art department was kind of split in two. We had certain set designers working on the Western, and we had certain set designers, myself, working on all of the more sci-fi environments. So to some degree, we were working in tangent with each other, but separately, because truly they needed to seem like two different worlds. It was the behind the scenes, and then it was the in front of camera Western. So it was great. One of our set designers, Phil Toolin, was a hand drafter, and he would hand draft all those details for the saloons. Meanwhile, I'm 3D modeling and creating all of these sort of highly technical sci-fi environments. So it was, honestly, our behind the scenes is very similar to the show.
So theoretically, working for, let's say, a Marvel movie might have helped prepare you for Westworld?
Yes, and it did, because I worked on Captain America Civil War, and that was a lot of prisons, and it was a lot of labs, and it was very sort of high-tech sci-fi, and it was a great lead-up to it.
All right, so we're gonna go to Kong Skull Island.
Okay.
What was your first reaction when you read the script?
The script was actually very fast-paced and fascinating, and it also just there was so much of action. There was so many things happening, and like every minute had something happening in it. So that was kind of exciting when I read it. And I was kind of curious then to see how it would, convert to the screen. And I think it was a pretty fun action-paced movie when it came out.
So what would you say was the biggest challenge for you?
So on that, I was in a less of a position. So I suddenly, I was an assistant art director on that one, and it was my first show, big show. And before I had done a lot of independent, and I had designed and art directed on smaller scale movies, and this was my first big one. So in the reel they showed the skull, the boneyard. That's my set. So I was basically handed this set, and the designer was like, "Here, this is your set now. Take care of it." And then, of course, he would come in and check in and make sure that it was fine. But it was, we had to choreograph all the action. So I worked with the action teams, the stunt people to do that. And also it was working with construction very heavily to make sure that the bones look aged. I mean, we had a 40-foot skull and 60 feet bones. So, it was putting that all into the ground. It was in Hawaii, so we were on location for 6 months trying to get that done. So it was exciting and challenging all at once and very scary.
So 6 months in Hawaii is pretty cool.
I did want to come back.
All right, so switching gears to Avatar 2 and 3, which I know you can't say anything legally about, but is it a different process doing something like that? Because it is a very heavy CGI.
Exactly, it is. I think on a process level, it's taught me a lot. And a lot of what I deal with is process, and it is CG heavy, but it's going to be great. It's going to be awesome when it comes out.
Go back to Fruitvale Station. We're going because your early days. What was your initial reaction when you first read that script?
I mean, I cried. It was a beautiful script. I related to it. It was sweet and sad and tragic and sometimes even funny. But it was, I just needed to do, I knew I needed to do that film.
Obviously, you didn't have a big budget on that one. What were the challenges of trying to do the production design for a virtually independent film?
At that point, that's all I had been doing. So, I didn't look at it necessarily as challenges. It was just you got to learn how to be resourceful and make the money stretch. And I was doing what I was used to doing. So, looking back at it, the challenge really was to create just the spaces that we needed, to find them, to create them so that Ryan could do what he needed with the camera work, and you know what I mean, we could kind of tell the story that we wanted to tell, but still controlling the color story. Yeah.
Now you had if I'm not mistaken, a slightly bigger budget for Black Panther. Slightly.
It wasn't much bigger though. I don't remember it being bigger. I think I only had one other person with me on that too. Just kidding.
So I'm assuming there were different challenges trying to mix the visual effects and joining that team to give a consistent look.
Working on it's not different though. It's just on paper you have more money, but I still had to figure out how to make it work because, inevitably the more money you have, the more things you want, and it's bigger. So now it's we're looking at the number and we can build the whole city. Maybe we can, maybe we can't. We can build a whole block of a town and stuff like that. So there's more that you're doing.
But creatively, it must have been really exciting to be able to create this whole new world.
Oh, yeah, that was, you kind of are paralyzed at first because of that. Because you're sort of I can really, I'm free. I'm free to do this. And then you're like, all right, no, because it's not the police station in Boston. It's not the things that the hospital corridor. How many have we seen of those, And I kind of my reaction to that was research and understanding and giving the world rules for me to break. I needed to rebel against something, but there wasn't anything there. So I had to create something, to rebel against. And that's what I did, in some aspects.
It was a wonderful movie. Thank you so much. All right, so let's go back to some Black Lightning. Yeah. What was did you read the script first, or were you shown the episode first?
No, we read the script first. I'm a real big proponent of reading the scripts, and I want to start from where the producers started, which is with the written page. And I guess because my big brother Ralph Farquhar is a writer, and he's always said, yeah, you got to read these scripts, brother, get into it and see where it really came from. And I always like to see that journey from the written page to what actually happened. So many people become involved, and you get the actor bringing their character to it. You have the director and his vision, and you have the right down to the cinematographer and just how he composes a shot and the textures and all of this. All of that informs what I do with the music, and I'm trying to respond to and be deeply inside and of the picture and what's happening on screen.
Now, if we're talking TV, scoring for TV versus features, do you want to know the arc of the season, or do you want to take it by episode by episode?
Well, I have to know some of the arc of the season. There's certain things that I do have to know, but I'm a firm believer in finding it out at the last minute, because as a composer, our job is to tell you what to feel, and I want to, if you see the same thing, if I walk in a room and some guy starts shooting, and then another guy comes in and he starts shooting, and the first time you're really shocked, oh my God, and then the second time you maybe a little less so about it. Third time it's happening, you're trying to figure out only how do I get out of here, and so it becomes more mental at that time. I want to react. I want to explode onto the screen, and if it's a startling thing, I want to startle you. If it's emotional, I want to give you the deepest emotions of first love, not 20 years later love. That's a very different thing, and so that's what I'm trying to do is remain as close to the initial moments as possible.
So if you don't see the script, you're not seeing the setup and the payoff for the multiple seasons.
Yeah, exactly.
We're going to go back to a show I really like first, Pushing Daisies. Yes, Pushing Daisies. So what was unique about that show, working on that show compared to others?
Well, it's an adult fantasy world, and there was really nothing like that on the air, or really has been since. There's magic in this world, and it's not for children, it's for adults, and I think that's what made it really special.
And was there any unique challenges to doing the score for that one, or?
Everything about that score was difficult. I had 6 days to do each episode, and I can only write 30 seconds of that every hour, so that meant I'd have to spend 16 hours a day, 6 days a week to write the score to do 42 minutes. And then on the 7th day, I would watch the next week's episode in the morning with Brian Fuller, and then conduct at night the previous week's episode, and then we would start the cycle over again. Super difficult.
So in the case of Series of Unfortunate Events, is that a little easier, different work schedule for you or approach?
Well, here's the difference is with a Series of Unfortunate Events, we're not limited by broadcast time. So the episodes won't stop at 42 minutes. They will go to 45 and 50 and 55. So there can actually be much more music in a Series of Unfortunate Events, but the schedule was enough that I could actually do it in a very reasonable way. I would have to write about half as much music every day as what I did on Pushing Daisies.
Obviously, we talked a season ago. What's special about the next season?
Okay, well, season 3, my favorite thing so far has been we worked a Verdi opera into one of the episodes, into Penultimate Peril. And my wife is the voice of Morena Baccarin, who plays one of our characters on the show. Yeah, so she lip-synced to a recording, and then my wife replaced her as the opera voice in the show. So that was great to work together and then take all of the Verdi and then incorporate it into the narrative. Super challenge.
So we're going to start with Game of Thrones. The Long Night. Yeah. All right, so one of the things we noticed that in Game of Thrones, they use music and sound in a very interesting way. Right. I know Miguel likes no sound a lot, only the music. How was doing that final score, especially working the music and the sound and the mixing for that final big sequence with Arya?
It was challenging. I mean, it was the hardest episode we've ever done on Game of Thrones. Specifically, like all the battle stuff, finding the balance between the music and the sounds. It was hard because Ramin he had scored different versions of the score. And then when we started mixing it, we found there were so many things that were really difficult to register, to cut through some of the sounds of the whites climbing the walls and everything. So he had to sort of go back and rework some things, and when we went and mixed it again, it had more of a more of a relentless feel to the score for the whole battle. And then I think you're referring to the musical montage at the end, which is probably one of the most beautiful things I think like Ramin's ever scored.
And the thing is, usually I notice, especially in shows and sound mixing, their attitude is always go for more sound effects, go for the loud. Right. And it seems like in your show, they want silence and music.
Yeah, which is great. And I have to give credit to our showrunners, David and Dan. They really understand how music works. They know what underscore is supposed to do, and so they really have a lot of faith in Ramin to let him, write what he needs to write. That's going to help tell the story, but also have great themes that are memorable and beautiful.
And just as a fan, I'm curious, the workers on Game of Thrones, what was your reaction when you found out Arya was the one that kills the Night King?
The first thing I thought was my mind jumped straight to I can't wait until everyone sees this moment, and because inside I just jumped up. I was like, yes, that's so cool.
All right, we're gonna flip Stranger Things. Yeah. Now you have an 80s genre, blended music. So what are the challenges of doing a show like that, which has a blended genre set in the 80s?
Well, it's very different because obviously for obvious reasons, but also the way the two composers work. Ramin from a very traditional orchestral standpoint to Kyle Dixon and Michael Stein, who have this very heavy synthesizer based score and come from a background of being a live band, performing band. So those challenges are different in our workflow scenarios. I think that otherwise, it does all come down to making the music work best for helping the show move, telling the story, and all that kind of stuff. With the '80s stuff, it's for me, it's a refreshing change. We actually were mixing Game of Thrones the same time we were mixing the sound for Stranger Things, and they're right across the street from each other. So fortunately, I was able to just run across and run back and forth and be like, I'll be over. I got to go just do a quick fix on the other show. So that was a fun, adventurous.
You didn't accidentally slip some 80s music in the Game of Thrones and they complained?
No. No, it's funny that the showrunners are fans of each other's show too. So it was kind of nice that they knew what I was doing and where I was going. And so I'll be right back. And they're like, no spoilers.
Well, thanks so much for talking with us. Clarita diet. Yes. So what was your reaction when you first heard the script? What drew you to want to be a part of the story?
I actually got the call from Drew to do the show
better.
Because we worked together on Never Been Kissed and Romy and Michelle many years ago and had a good relationship, and she was like, this is her coming back from kind of a hiatus. She had children, got married, and she's like, I'm going to go back and produce this show and star in this show, and wanted to have somebody who really, she trusts. And I got that call, and I read the script, and I was like, wow, this is something super cool and different that I've never done before. I mean, zombies? Wow. Lots of blood, body parts flying around. So how do you prepare for that? Lots of multiples.
So it sounds like you have to create your own rules for the world as far as costumes. Yeah.
You do. Because, it all starts with, collaborating with the other departments, because you have to know how much blood there's going to be, how many body pieces are going to fly out and around. We have to be prepared for all kinds of different goos. I don't know if you remember, there was a scene when she actually gets the disease of being zombie when she throws up. Yep. That was quite phenomenal how much of vomit there was. I mean, seriously, I've never seen that much vomit. And then it started to smell after a couple days when they left it on stage. It was pretty bad.
And another piece of work, Enchanted. Amy Adams. And it was interesting because you had to blend animation with live action. So what's the process of collaborating on something like that? Because you got to create a costume that works for the other departments too.
Right. What was great on that movie that I got to be on this movie from very beginning of preparation, and I actually worked with the 2D animators, the old hand-drawn animation, Disney animation, and work with them creating the costumes because we knew we had to create them in live action. So it wasn't that I was copying them. I was working with them, designing them, because I mean, my thing was Amy Adams has got to look great in a dress later. That was the most important thing. But what was fun about that was really creating these costumes from these like cartoons. And when you really think of cartoons, they have very weird proportions. Like if you think of the dress, it has a tiny, tiny waist. Any princess dress has a tiny, tiny waist, big sleeves. So it's great and easy to draw this. But then how do you make it on Amy Adams, who is running around New York, streets and Times Square? So it really was momentous. I mean, the dress weighed maybe about 30 pounds. It had hundreds and hundreds of yards of fabric, but we had to make it so big so then we had the proportion of the animated characters of the tiny waist and the big sleeves. And that was because we wanted to have her look like a doll. So, it's phenomenal. And then working with the other characters that were transformation from 2D animation to live action, like Susan Sarandon, Maleficent character actually went from the drawing to live action to then CGI dragon turning into the dragon. So also continuity of all the colors and design and textures was really important. So I'm working with the 2D animators, but also the CGI artists who are creating the dragon to make sure that the scale and the color and all the metal work that I did turns into all the pieces of the dragon, like the horns and the wings of the dragon.
So it sounds like for something like this to work, the script better be darn good for all these different areas to be able to collaborate and pull this off.
It better be. That's what I have to say. Yeah, a lot of pressure there, But, it's so much fun. I mean, that's what's really, I think, costume design is such a creative job because you're also faced with challenges all the time. You have these ideas, but sometimes you don't know how to make them and how to implement them. So you're gathering all the other artists and fabric makers and boot makers and pattern makers and metal workers and, all these people coming together to create this, which is phenomenal. And then, of course, you have a director who is kind of on top of, the food chain, and, it's his vision that we also collaborating with, so we have to navigate his ideas as well. And then sometimes navigate ideas of actors. Because they may have their own little ideas of what to wear, what color they like, or maybe they're allergic to something. You never know.
So we're going to talk about your show, Jessica Jones.
Oh, season 2, yes.
Yeah. So we're going back to the beginning. What was your initial reaction when you first read the script? It made you want to be part of the show.
I first saw season 1 and I loved it. I didn't realize it was a written and directed by all women. So Melissa Rosenberg, when I met with her and Raelle Tucker when I interviewed for the second season, I was thrilled to hear that they were going to have all women directors again, which is kind of a novel idea, but given the material that Melissa wrote for Jessica Jones, which is, it's a female-driven show about her inner life and her struggles, which I think, of course, a male director could interpret, but it was a different way of working, which I appreciated. But I loved the show when I saw it. I thought it was interesting, and from a psychological standpoint, it wasn't just about an action figure who busts through walls. There was more happening in the layering of her internal life.
What is the challenge of production designer, or do you have to do? How many regular sets are there, or how many new sets you got to do on a weekly basis?
Right. So for season 2, but when I interviewed with them, they did tell me that there were going to be new sets to establish in season 2, which made it much more appealing and interesting to me because that's always kind of the hesitation in going on to a show that has been established already. But Hogarth's apartment was a new set, and I loved that. Was a lot of fun, and so I knew early on before I started the job that was going to have, the whole season was going to have some new stuff to design. And it was fun to design for stunts too, which I'd never done before. Yeah, knowing that someone's going to come through the wall or have to get thrown out a window, and to figure out what does that space look like, knowing that that's what's going to happen.
That must mean that you're coordinating with a different department now, the stunt coordinator, trying to figure this all out together.
Absolutely. So it was a stunt coordinator, special effects. We were very tight for the whole season. There was a lot that we had to work together on. Yeah, it was a fun collaboration.
Now, a slightly different show, Better Call Saul. Yeah, how is that working on that show different, perhaps, than Jessica Jones?
Well, there were less stunts, although there were stunts, but there was less action of like things, people coming through walls. Definitely for that, and it's a different tone. It's similar in that it's an internally driven show from the characters. So that was similar, but slightly different approach.
So we're going to go a little Bojack. So what was your reaction when you first read the script, when you were first brought onto the project?
Okay, I actually do have an answer for this. I came and I watched I didn't read the script. I watched the animatics first. And I could see, it was like rough storyboards timed out. And I was like, holy crap, this made me cry. I was like, just from the storyboards, this has never happened before where watching a storyboard, it's made me cry. So I get it's really powerful stuff. So I can understand why, it has like a rabid fan base because it still does. I worked on the first 2 seasons. And then since then, my husband is the supervising director. So I've watched them and I was like, damn it, they did it again. Like I'm getting teary-eyed and I was trying to hide it.
So what are the unique challenges to doing Bojack Horseman? I mean, I know you're emotionally invested, but now you have to actually make it. Yeah. So what is challenging about that show?
I can tell you it's not easy to make a horse head move around in space. It's not like a person's head where you can like have a simple line where you're redrawing it and it's fairly easy. A horse, their face sticks out like this. So when you're moving it around, it makes everything more complicated. And try doing a mouth pack for that. That's way more complicated. And then on top of that, the show has a lot of textures. So moving the textures around and not showing the seams of the textures is really challenging. And it also just makes it difficult to make the movement very fluid. So you're constantly fighting that. It's trying to keep that fluidity in there.
You must be fun creatively because there's no rules to your world, but at the same time you got to create your own rules so you have a world that makes sense.
Yeah, well, there actually are a lot of rules. One of the rules that Lisa, the art director of Bojack, said was no tails. She said they're in a world with animals and people, but there are no tails. And we had some fan wrote in and he was like, he wanted us to go back and even though the first season had already come out, he wanted us to go back and add tails in and put tails on every, I don't know. It's crazy, like the things that people get obsessed about, but. So
let's go back to the beginning. We always ask, how were you brought onto the project? How did you initially get onto the project?
Well, I was brought on to Preacher second season, and I had worked with, I had known one of the executive producers through some other friends, and he was aware of my work and thought that I would be a good match with both the showrunner and the style of the show, being that it was a little out of the box and a lot of different kind of elements. So he thought I would be a good match for it, and it turned out that I loved the show, and I was there for 3 years.
Now, what are some unique challenges of doing a show like this, costume-wise? Because you have a kind of a surreal world, yes. So you have to create your own rules and guidelines, Definitely. But follow your own kind of path.
Absolutely. Well, the biggest challenge for me always is that every single one of our characters always has to have many, many multiples, because there's always a car chase, there's always a fight, there's always blood, so we constantly have to find multiples. We don't even shop for something. Like I was never able to use vintage clothing because we needed at least 4 of everything, every costume.
Wow. So I'm assuming since it's a weekly show, you have also some serious time constraints, and you're doing 4 costumes per.
Yes, exactly. Yes, we basically do a show every 7 to 8 days, and so we're moving very quickly, and we're always wrapping a show, filming a show, and prepping a show all at the same time.
And talk a little about what is the process of collaborating with your collaborators, like production designer and the visual effects and DP? How does that process work, especially for a show like this, which has so much stunts and things going on?
Well, it's very, very important, particularly for the production designer and the set decorator, because they are basically the frame or the portrait frame that my costume is going to go into. So I need to make sure that, my actress isn't wearing a polka dot dress that's going to be on a plaid couch. So we need to dialogue about all of that. I also need to always check in what the colors of the rooms are so that my actors aren't wearing clothes that will disappear against a wall. So it's very, very important to collaborate with them as early on as possible so that I don't come up with all these designs and find out that they're not going to work. So.
But it must help that you have awesome scripts every week.
Yes. Fantastic.
Handmaid's Tale.
Yes.
So we asked kind of all the artists the same question. What was your initial reaction when you first got brought into the project? What really drew you to the project?
I love Margaret Atwood. And oddly enough, I worked on a show just prior to going on to Handmaids that was Alias Grace. Oh. So that summer it was all things Atwood.
So for you, I mean, it is, of course, a very surreal world, but also grounded in reality. What is the challenge for you making sure that you can ground the show in reality so people can kind of accept this world as real?
I think I try to study the psychology of where these people are at in their arc. And even though we're wearing just teal, just red, I try to individualize everything. Like, for example, the handmaids, they all look the same at the glance, but they're actually quite individual. For example, they all have very different sweaters. The wives, for example, are all in teal, but they have very different tailoring and structure, and depending on who they are in society and what their arc is at that moment. For example, Serena this year has a huge arc, and we take her from one shape to another and one tonality to another.
It's interesting. So do you know the whole entire season? So how far ahead do you get to know the story?
One episode at a time. I get a general beat sheet, which means I kind of have an inkling of what might come up, but often you get the script and it's completely different from the beat sheet. So.
But in some ways, maybe you don't want to know, because then you might be foreshadowing a character change.
Exactly, and you don't want to give it away, So, and in this year, everything that is in the costume, from the buttons to the shoulders to the neckline, is thought out. There's a meaning behind it, so nothing is happenstance. Yeah, including even the socks, the vests, everything. The way the tie is tied, it all means something.
So you worked on Key and Peele, and so my question for you is, what was it like being able to make a series of short films from a production designer standpoint?
It was a lot of work. On Key and Peele, we did 86 sketches a season, and a season was 7 weeks. So we shot 2 a day, 10 a week, week after week after week. So you can imagine every single day we're making cinematic sketches and going and approaching it like it's a movie and not a sketch comedy show every single day. But one is in the 1800s, one is sci-fi, one's a nightclub, the other one is an aerobics workout set from the 80s. So every day you're doing tons and tons of research and learning and pulling from history to create an authentic look for a sketch comedy show with Jordan and Keegan.
So how much time did you have between, to prep for the sketch?
Not much. So the art department and myself would start 3 weeks before we started shooting. And the writers would hand us a binder with 86 sketches in them. And our job was to break down 86 looks, put research up all over the walls, walk Jordan and Keegan over and say, do you like this look? And when they would say, great, it was then our opportunity to get approval and start budgeting it and drawing it and doing 3D renders and have the construction department building them and the dressers and the set decorators and the graphics department all pulling them together, and they would go on 3 trucks and we would go to a soundstage or we would go to a location and off they would come, shoot them, and by lunch, one would be done, back on the truck. After lunch, we're shooting the second one, and we would do that in 7 weeks, and we would shoot 86 of them.
It must be a unique show then that everybody had to be on the same page together. The costume designer, production director, everybody.
Yeah, it was like being in a rock, like the Rolling Stones or the Beatles, because the costume designer had to know that I was going to deliver, and the DP had to know that I was going to deliver, and I had to know that the art department was going to deliver. There was no time to prep, plan, have meetings, sit down, look at stuff. You just had to know that everybody was going to bring their A game every single day for 7 weeks.
But as an artist, it must have really helped you kind of grow as an artist too, having all this different experience.
I'm not afraid of anything. right now I'm doing crank anchors. We're doing 280 sets that are all puppet sets, so they're all 4 feet off the ground, and every single one looks different. And people, when I start the job, the producer or the director might say, like, can you handle this? And I always say, if I did Key and Peele, I could do anything.
So we'll dive right in. What is the biggest challenge of trying to do a feature-length film every single week on episodic TV?
I mean, it's exactly that. We're trying to squish all of this hard work and detail into a broadcast schedule and make it look like a feature film every week. Like, that's exactly what the challenge is. So, yeah, I mean, we are not short on talented people in this town. It's so great, and that's what helps us get it through. But yeah, and we set the bar really high. That's probably on us, but like, it looks really great.
All right, so let's talk about the big episode, the Kalon War. Yeah. What was the biggest challenge for you trying to do that two-parter?
I think the biggest challenge was really just getting what the vision was going to look like, because we obviously had never done it before, and we didn't want to look like Star Wars, and we didn't want to look like Star Trek. We wanted to look like the Orville. Like, how would the Orville do a battle? And Brandon Fayette and Luke McDonald really helped, help us, see it. And our previous team from Pixamundo, they were able to, pump out just versions of different things and get in front of Seth. And Seth was like, yeah, that looks great. John Gassar was able to say, yeah, this is what I was thinking. And we were able to really just like bring the team together and just come up with this vision. And everybody's input was able to make it into the Orville battle. It wasn't a ripoff on anything. It was like our own organic, battle that we made from our love, sweat, and tears and hard work. So.
Yeah, what is the process of collaborating with a production designer and costume designer? Because you all do have to be in sync.
Yeah, absolutely. It's tons of meetings, tons and tons of meetings. But absolutely every minute of those meetings is a useful tool to help us get even further into the process. Because we're such a visual effects heavy show, and we are really putting the show in space. We have to know what the other departments are doing. Like, what is art deck doing? What is locations doing? All the way up to like, what is Crafty serving for lunch? Like, we're very much involved in every single aspect, because at the end of the day, like, we're the last people that touch it before it ends up on the screen. So we have to know where their heads are at, what their plans are, what they're going to do on the day, so that we also are able to translate that into the final product.
I love, one of my favorite parts of the Orville is some of the more dramatic scenes, the more intimate scenes, which of course has a lot of visual effects, but pull it back. I specifically love the episodes with the gender reassignment thing. Yeah. How do you approach those kind of like intimate scenes, like the court trial or something like that, where you got to augment it, but you don't want to take away from the drama?
Yeah, it's honestly, we try to make it look and feel like the show, like any other part, whether, we're going to Alara's planet, whether we're blowing up the Orville, like, all those things have to have the same amount of detail and attention that, the little things do of, what color are the people on the Rigor 2 planet wearing? Like, they should wear, like, more of a boring color. We should be the vibrant ones. Like, we have to pay attention to all those details as well, because it does help tell the story and helps put our fans into the world that, they want to watch and want to be a part of.
All right, we do have some graduating students. What kind of advice do you have who want to go into visual effects?
Oh my goodness. When I graduated CSUN, I had no idea what visual effects even really was. I saw a green screen and I was like, cool, what is that? And I got into it through connections from my school, actually. And somebody had reached out to CSUN and said, hey, we just need somebody that's very tech savvy and, knows how to edit. We're going to teach them everything else. Like, who do you trust? And I was like, is that me? And so I went and I interviewed at Fuse. They brought me on, and I love being a sponge and just like absorbing so much information. And it was such a great like part of the industry to be a part of, because like there's just so many things to be a part of that, when you're in school, you want to be a director, you want to be a producer, you want to be a writer, you want to be like the top 4 things, but you don't know about, like, you could do award shows, you could do visual effects, you could do games, you could be an actress, like, for YouTube channel, like, you could do anything. So for visual effects specifically, I just say get in there, do something, do anything, take any job that's available, even if it's, you know, for a YouTube channel or if it's for Twitter or for anything, just like get involved, because the industry is always changing and there's so many different technologies that are being used all the time. Just YouTube and Google everything, get involved, just like get in there, dive in there, because if you don't, somebody else will. So, yeah.
Well, thanks so much for talking to us. What's the biggest challenge for you trying to produce a feature-length film every single week?
It's a challenge for everybody, I gotta tell you. Well, I'll tell you, the big advantage we have on this show, which I haven't seen on a lot of shows I've worked on, is that we have all the scripts right at the beginning of the year. So for example, in Identity Part 1 and 2, which is our big space battle, which is playing here at the Experience, that had such a big space battle. We started working that at the beginning of the year. And I think it was episode 9. Now again, if you were getting the scripts one at a time, you wouldn't have time. So everybody has a chance to get ahead. So the wardrobe people go, oh, we got a new species of creatures coming up. What are they gonna wear? What are they gonna look like? The prosthetic guys can get ahead. So because we get the scripts early, we can do that. We can produce what looks like a feature, but really it's a television show and on a television show budget.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about the big Identity Parts 1 and 2, which you directed.
Yes.
What was the challenge for that one? What did you have to do first? That was your biggest battle ever.
And we knew right from the beginning, like at the very beginning of the season, Seth virtually gave them those scripts and said, this is the game changer for us. These 2 episodes is going to be, you know, instrumental for us. It's our 2 biggest shows, because that's where we introduced the Kalon as the new enemy, which no one saw coming, including me, by the way. And so he gave me those right away and said, you know, these are the ones we got to like already be way ahead on. So even though I was directing the 2nd episode and the 4th episode, I think, even though I was directing those first, we were always working on these 2 episodes because we knew how big they were. And we had to introduce, you know, what the Kalon planet looked like, which was one of our biggest challenges. So yeah, we got ahead on that. Every department got ahead on that really quickly. Not to mention, we had 1 Kalon outfit for Mark Jackson, and suddenly we had to have 40. So that alone was a massive, massive challenge for the wardrobe department.
But dramatically for the cast, it must be good knowing, because you had the Isaac relationship and all that stuff. Knowing all that in advance enabled you to map out the whole season dramatically.
Yes, exactly. So it really helped knowing that for the cast, even though they didn't know it the year before. And the writers said they always did. So it's kind of a great little secret that they had waiting for everyone. And I think we loved it too, because I think, you know, we have an amazing fan base. We love our fan base, and we love that they love the show like we love the show. But I think those 2 episodes there were people on the fence with us, not sure if we were real sci-fi yet. And I think after those 2 episodes, those people jumped over the fence and they're with us now and realize that we can do sci-fi with the best of them right now. And that space battle that my visual effects team were nominated for an Emmy for was just unbelievable. They did such an amazing job.
I'm a huge sci-fi fan, but I like though is some of the more social themes you're exploring too, like the gender reassignment thing storyline. How was that for you developing that storyline over the past 2 seasons?
Again, when I first came on, I only did 1 episode the first year, and I did the Krill episode where they go on the Krill ship and. You know, at the end of it, they kind of have to kill all the krill, but then the kids are left over. And there's that great moment at the end where she goes, you've just made more enemies by killing their parents. You know, and so there's that moment where you go, well, this was funny, but now that's not funny. That's a serious kind of look into our world right now with all the wars we have going on, where we just keep making enemies of the same people by killing their parents. And so all of those kind of social themes are really exciting to me, because that's great storytelling. And so you have the sci-fi, you've got the comedy, and then you've got the social relevance, which, you know, almost every episode has something in it. So, and that's that's a real throwback to the old Star Trek, because that's what it was about. It wasn't just about a bunch of people flying around in a spaceship. It was about our world, and maybe we can make it better by exploring some of these themes and revealing some of them for what they are. And so that's what the writers do well, and that's been Seth's mission from the very beginning.
I did like also towards the finale with Kelly and the memory. Yeah, that was very interesting character. Like, she must have really enjoyed playing that part.
You know, she did a great job. I remember, I was there when we shot it, and we would have to constantly change her back and forth, because within the same scene, she had to go, get changed, and come back. So, you know, I saw her as both characters, but I remember when I finally watched the whole episode for the first time, I went, this is like 2 different people. Like, this was amazing what she did. And so even though I was there watching it, I emailed her right away and said, You know, Adrian, this was an incredible thing that you did. You were two completely different characters, and she pulled it off. It was great.
Well, thanks so much. Good luck with this season, and we look forward to seeing it. So what is the challenge? We asked all the artists the same question to start. What's the challenge of trying to do a feature-length film on a weekly basis?
The fact that you actually asked that question, you already know what the challenge is. So that's amazing. It's doing a feature film on a weekly basis with a feature director who cares about it as much, if not more than you do, which is a high bar because we match each other in that. And just trying to push the envelope of the material, and also like we're building a universe, so being respectful to that. It's a real trick sometimes because we don't cut corners narratively, performance-wise. So we'll work these things to death till we get the best every inch out of every piece of dailies.
So we'll talk two different ways. Obviously, you have a lot of comedy. I mean, it's Seth MacFarlane.
Yes.
So how is it kind of editing and pacing the comedy episodes, or a little more of the comedic sequences?
The way I do it is, I have a background in I have a background in unscripted, and I have a background in I've done some comedy and some drama, so I've been able to sort of get the timings down. So I lean into whatever the scene is. I lean into sort of the editorial stylings of that scene. Sometimes it's comedy and it's banter between Scotty and Jay Lee. I'll pace it up. If it's if it's a more dramatic scene, I just play straight as a dramatic scene. I don't worry about where the narrative's going to take it. I mean, we have amazing actors. We have guys like John Cassar who do an amazing job directing. And so I know that if we let things breathe, the actors are going to bring it. And we have great, and great material to work with. So
now the flip side is then you have an episode like Identity, two-parter, which is different pacing and actually, almost broke format in a lot of ways, like action-packed. Right. So what kind of approach is that when you kind of go into a more battle scene? Or
that's an interesting one because that, that started with a great script from Brandon. And he actually, if he was here, and he told us like, I wrote the script. I didn't think you were going to it was the first. I didn't think you were going to shoot it all, which is hilarious to me. And then of course, thank God, Cassar did all the live action stuff. But it was one of those things that we kind of had loose story beats, and working with me working with Brandon who put together previs, who then I would then give him notes, and then Seth would throw in ideas. It became this giant organic rotational thing where we just built this amazing battle. We were lucky to have Brooke Noska, our VFX producer, and it just evolved into this massive interwoven battle. And we added 200 shots in post. So and we're all of us are responsible for it in different parts. It's like one big organic building up a battle scene. Same thing happened in the finale too.
Well, that's what's interesting about editing work with the VFX, because a lot of our students are not aware of how that relationship is so integral. So can you talk a little about collaborating with the VFX department?
Yeah, I mean, well, in general, you tend to collaborate with the VFX department. We are all bonded in fire, so it's a very organic process. They're constantly backing me up to get me out of scrapes because I'll do some compositing or some things that I need to do to change the narrative or fix something, and they allow me to be part of their. I get to, give notes on the previs and sort of tailor the story. Or if I need to add a shot to tell something narratively, they'll make it up for me. But they have Brandon and Brooke, and they're so brilliant at what they do. It's only elevating the material. So, but it's a very cyclical thing. And then of course Seth is the big cycle around that. And then if we're lucky enough, it's a John Cassar episode. He's another cycle. So we're all swimming in the same direction.
So I know they're all your children, but is there any particular episode you were most proud of, or wow, this one was really special?
Yeah, I'll tell you, Happy Refrain. That's going to be in this. I mean, the first season it was Into the Fold. I know they both happen to be Claire Isaac episodes, but season 2, Happy Refrain. That's where I felt like the show went to a special place. I mean, we tossed off. There was a 75-piece orchestra playing, Sound of Music, singing in the rain. I mean, so that. But just about the multi-level character stuff and seeing Mark out of costume and getting to watch him do his work. I mean, him and Penny brought it. I just have a real soft spot for that one. But they are all my babies. I love them all differently. Yeah.
Well, John mentioned that it's one of these rare shows where you get all the scripts in advance.
Yes.
So it does give you a little different. Normal TV doesn't allow you. You don't even know where the show's going sometimes. How is that for you, you think, as an artist, knowing I can kind of now join the arc of the show or the characters?
That's exactly what it is that I have an idea. It helps you inform your decisions. And even if like the last scripts, maybe there's a draft they want to do, but like 90% of it, 80% of it, you know where the story's going. So every little minute decision you're making creatively is to help drive that narrative towards the end. It's nice to know where the end is, because then you can sort of like reverse engineer your way towards that. So
What was your reaction when you found out that Kalon were going to be the villains?
Oh my God. I was like, it took me a while to figure out if Isaac was, for lack of a better word, BSing. Yeah. And then I was like, all right, we're going to lean into this. I was excited. I thought it was a brilliant twist. I thought it's the kind of stuff that I love. I'm trying to compare it to something. It's, it's like in Battlestar Galactica when they jumped a year ahead. Yeah. They're in the reboot. Where you're like, what the hell just happened? But then you lean into it, and it's like the greatest two-parter in the history of television.
Well, thanks so much for joining us.